I'm Eve, filling in for Hattie tonight. On tonight's episode, CF Montreal picks up a late draw against the Whitecaps, Bev Priestman reveals her squad for the 2024 Olympics, and the Canadian men's national team remains the last CONCACAF spot standing at Copa America. All that and more on tonight's episode of The Ball is Round. And we're back after a little while. Howdy, stranger. How are you?
I'm doing great. How was your time off? How was your vacation?
Much deserved. It was wonderful, restful. No, actually, that's a lie. It wasn't restful. It was really busy. 2 weeks in London. Our flight back got canceled, so we had an extra day in London. But it was really fun. It was really fun. How has everything been while I've been gone?
You know, the same old, same amount of chaos, same stuff, different day, right?
Exactly.
You know, all in all, we've been blessed with soccer content and with
loads
of soccer to watch. So at least there's that.
Yeah, very true. You know, I felt kind of bad taking off, and so much stuff started happening in soccer, and I was like, oh my God, I picked a real time to go on vacation, didn't I? And for anyone tuning in case you're wondering, Hattie should be back with us next week. He just got back from a vacation of his own and is just kind of recovering from the jet lag. So he should be back with us next week, knock on wood. But we've had terrible luck this year, so I would never guarantee everyone's going to be all together next week.
You never really do know when it's going to hit you.
True that. So obviously, we have a ton of content to go over. We are going to kind of focus just on what has happened most recently, because we'd be here all night if we had to catch up on the last 3 weeks in Canadian soccer. But certainly, you know, we can, I guess, harken back maybe to some events that took place while we were away if we feel it's timely. So as always, let's get started with CF Montreal, who played last night hosting the Vancouver Whitecaps at Stade Saputo. And while I was away, a bit of a roller coaster, I would say, these last couple of weeks for Montreal. You know, they picked up kind of a really interesting win against Philadelphia. They then, of course, went and did their usual loss at a baseball field in New York, not the usual one, but the other one for
tradition. Tradition is important, right? So
yes, we love a good tradition. That's exactly how I felt about it. You know, had some results, got blown out by Colorado. So again, just kind of that inconsistency continuing to be the theme, I guess, for the season for Montreal. But let's talk about last night. And first and foremost, let's take a look at the lineup that Laurent Courtois put forth. Of course, still several players missing with their national team, specifically Canada. And so we were given a lineup of José Roy in net, George Campbell, Fernando Alvarez, and Joaquin Sosa making up the three-man central defense. Lassi Lappalainen subbed in as Ruan was rested on the bench. At right wing back, Raheem Edwards started at left wing back. We had a double pivot of Nathan Saliba and Wanyama wearing the captain's band in the midfield. And the attacking phase of play would be led by Dominik Yankov, Ariel Hester, with, of course, Joseph Martinez as the starting striker. And I think probably notably as well is that we saw Matias Kokoro return to the bench, having kind of been in the doghouse for a little bit. And we've come to know the doghouse under whichever Montreal coach has been leading the helm. And so he was, I guess, just the latest entrance into that doghouse. And we can say certainly a quick hi to Robbie. I do see his comment there on the right-hand side of my screen. I still don't have my admin rights back, so I'm just going to say it because I see it. Anyway, so hi, Robbie. we do see your comment. Oh, there it is. Perfect. Thank you. So as always, let's get started and talk about the players kind of back to front and individual by individual. So Jonathan Serrois, what did you make of his night last night?
I think those were one of the games where maybe his distribution is a bit the struggles with his distribution is a bit more on display because there were a number of times where, it was nothing catastrophic. But again, if you're looking at your keeper to maybe help you break some lines and help you get the ball further down the field and in some more advantageous positions when building out, Jonathan Silva still isn't your guy, right?
Yeah.
When it comes to shot stopping, it was a relatively quiet night.
Yeah.
There were some close chances here or there, but a lot of it was, par for the course or what we would expect with Jonathan Silva, nothing glaring. That
Right.
goal, I can't blame him too much.
Mm-hmm.
He could have done a little bit better,
I
maybe.
was gonna
But
say, like, when it's at the when it's at the keeper's near post, I think it's
yeah,
always like certainly at least your gut instinct is gonna be to say like it was so close, like
yeah.
just to
But I mean, a keeper getting caught
yeah.
in that situation is a
Oh, it
lot
happens all the time.
less, but it's a lot less damning than what we saw from the center backs and their coverage on that.
True that, and
Because
we will
that
for
is,
sure talk about
we're gonna
them.
get into that for sure because I feel
Yeah.
like that is a lot more
Hi, Andy.
concerning. That's Andy. Andy's in here as well. Hi Andy, how you doing? But yeah, that was so I mean Jonathan Silva I think has become I think he's maybe dispelled the fears of him being a one season wonder. Maybe we're still looking to see um that keeper that would carry Montreal and almost unwillingly to points and to wins. But I think that you know what he's definitely established himself as a very very solid MLS keeper, which is a great thing to come out of the academy.
Yeah. That's we're continuing to I think deal with some of those growing pains, and hopefully once Montreal is able to find some defensive stability, that also keeps him hopefully that also kind of just contributes to some more confidence on his part, so that maybe we see like a little bit sharper decision making when it comes to some of that distribution, or even just more of a comfort to take risks again. Because I kind of felt like it was a little bit of an attempt at being a little bit safer last night than, and with the varying degrees of success, but it didn't feel like he was going to suddenly like pull an Alisson or send somebody down for an assist or even try to do that. So anyway, I think continue to monitor and hope that we see things improving in that regard.
Absolutely.
But I also think some stability in with the players directly in front of him would also probably help matters in that area.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. All right. Shall we move on to our central defenders?
Yes. Oh,
Okay.
God, it's a mixed bag.
Okay. Well, who do you want to start with?
I feel the need to start with Fernando Alvarez, who
Okay.
was kind of not thrust into that middle center back position, but definitely has gotten it with Gabriel Corbo not
I think
available
almost by
and Joe
process of
Waterman.
elimination. Yeah.
Exactly. And I think you know what? For first of all, for a player of his stature, he's doing remarkably well in the air. And I think that he's definitely exceeded expectations in that respect. But with the ball, I think that he's showing a lot of maturity and almost kind of what we were expecting out of George Campbell in terms of he's bold with the ball, but he's definitely not reckless. And I think that's what you really want to see. And that's maybe the biggest revelation we've had from him.
Yeah.
And honestly, I think that leads a lot into him being, he wasn't my pick for man of the match. That was Nathan Saliba. We're gonna get into that later. But
That was also
he
my
had
pick.
he had an excellent game though. And
He
credit where
did.
credit is
Obviously,
due.
he saved a goal in the second half.
Exactly.
So he put his body on the line. He recognized because Serrois was frozen on that particular shot
Yeah,
that
no, he was
Vancouver had
beat
taken.
completely.
Yeah. So it was 100%. I think, in my opinion, a goal-saving clearance by Alvarez, and he just threw himself where he needed to be. All good. No, so I think he was the strongest of the three central defenders last night, and I do see the comment from Andy saying that the lack of chemistry is very is very evident between the central
Yeah.
defenders. And I have to wonder if just kind of the revolving door of people coming and going, whether that's because of call-ups or suspensions or injuries or just the coach's decision, because there was no like obvious reason for Gabriele Corbo to be on the bench last night, right?
No, but the thing is, at this point, I think besides Joel Waterman, there's nobody
Hmm.
that's operating at such a high level that they are absolutely guaranteed a starter spot.
Yeah, I agree.
That he can now he goes on a week by week basis of who he thinks is in the best form.
Yeah.
Maybe matches
I
up.
mean, I would say Fernando Alvarez is operating at a very consistent
I
level.
think especially during this international break, he's definitely made that case.
Yeah.
But up until now, right, the other
Yeah.
three have been not interchangeable, but I think none of the three have made the case
There
to
have been
be
hot and cold moments for sure.
exactly. None of them are saying I have to be one of the first names on the team sheet.
Yeah.
And so I think that's also leading Courtois to maybe experiment something. And then, like Andy
Hmm.
said, right, that lack of continuity means that you don't necessarily build as strong a rapport as you do if you play
Hmm.
every single game, game in, game out together.
Yeah. Exactly. No, and occasional rotation can happen from time to time, but we've kind of reached the point of this being just like a revolving door. So anyway, we know for sure Joel Waterman is going to be away for the next match because regardless
Mhm.
of the outcome of Canada's semifinal match, they're going to be playing the third place match or maybe the final. A girl can dream.
Well, I mean,
So
the silver lining of them not getting any minutes is the second they come back, they're ready to hop right into the
not
lineup.
knock on
They're,
wood, because
yeah,
unfortunate things can happen in training, as we have
that is
learned.
that is also true.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Um, so that being said, anyway, we know basically that there's going to be who knows what arrangement of defenders present for next week's match as well. And of course, we do certainly hope no more accidents in training because that was a very unfortunate incident for
Yeah,
Portage Buchanan.
absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm happy to see that he's okay. He's gotten his surgery, and the team seems to have rallied
Hmm.
behind him. But that's that's horrible.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Returning to CF Montreal in particular, so our other two defenders, let's maybe move along because I think you kind of almost took the easiest one first. I would have talked about, or I would have talked about Fernando Alvarez last if I'd been given the choice. But let's maybe talk about George Campbell.
Well, we may have to.
Well, we have to.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
wasn't too thrilled with his performance.
Hmm.
Defensively, I think going forward, he does bring a lot, and he does kind of remind me of almost Kamal Miller in that sense,
Yeah.
where of the three center backs, he's definitely the most offensively inclined and the most willing to
Yeah.
get forward and take people on, and I love that about him. But with Lassie there as well, you don't have Juan, who's as experienced a defender.
Hmm.
Um, so I mean, the gap was there all the entirety of the first half, right?
Yeah.
And that caused the goal. That caused that great run by Fafa Pico that ended up going off the crossbar. That was on their side
Hmm.
as well. So I think that was a problem area the entirety of the first half. And you know, when you're playing against a team like Winnipeg, excuse me, like the Whitecaps,
Yeah.
where you're not expecting to have, a lot of the ball, we're expecting it to be a bit of a back and forth game. You can't have that big a liability. If you're going against a team that's struggling and you're expecting to have 55%, 60% of the ball and, dominate a lot of possession, then you could have that,
Hmm.
very attacking minded right side. But I was really concerned. And I mean, very clearly Vancouver tried to exploit that side and they
Yeah.
got a lot of joy out of it.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree. I think with anything that you said, and I think as well, it's like a pretty consistent theme that
Mhm.
we felt uh, when George Campbell has been playing in defense. So like I wasn't terribly surprised, I guess, to see, but like especially even when you look at say the heat map of Vancouver, you can tell that their attack trended slightly towards that right hand side of the pitch, and of course unsurprising given that that's kind of where the defense is lacking the most, I guess. However, I wouldn't go so far as to say Joaquin Sosa necessarily covered himself in glory on the other side of the defense, sadly.
No, no, I don't think so either.
And no, obviously, I think he's probably the person to whom we can point the finger at the most when it comes to Montreal conceding the goal because it was his coverage of Brian White that was a little bit late. And so that allowed, of course, White to get in there. And he's been in great form as a striker as well. And I saw the stat pop up on Apple TV, and it was like Ryan Gold and I think Brian White have contributed for 19 out of 20 of the last Vancouver goals, which is just wild. So I don't know. I don't know how they managed, he managed to kind of sneak in there, because I would have hoped that the instruction would have been like, mark these guys like your life depends on it.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, that it appeared that was not the case. But other than the goal, did you have any remarks on Joaquin Sosa's performance?
No, I think, I think they adjusted to the goal really well.
Mm-hmm.
On that left side, I think him and Raheem Edwards are very slow. They may not be as dynamic as Campbell and Juan, for example,
Mm-hmm.
but I think that, they have their own kind of maybe conservative approach
Mm-hmm.
to the way they operate that flank. It's definitely not as take people on one-on-one, take people on with a dribble, go at them with pace, but I do think they bring a technical quality that's a bit stronger than Juan and Campbell do together. It's a bit more, maybe a bit more measured.
Okay.
And that asymmetry, I get it does have its advantages. I guess you have different things on different sides of the field depending on what you want to maybe exploit. But
Mm-hmm.
ultimately, I still feel like while they're a bit more solid technically, there's still no danger being produced on that left side. So we
No.
saw a little bit of Ariel Lasser making those runs into the space where that was very nice to have him back from Copa America. But at the same time, Raheem Edwards wasn't really getting it that far up the pitch. And
Mm-hmm.
Joaquin Sosa, who, yeah, was relatively faultless in build up, but like, that only goes so far if you're expecting, if you want to be a team that controls the tempo and dominates play, that left side, yeah, you didn't make any mistakes, but you didn't do anything outstanding either.
Yeah, yeah. But again, we've talked about the constant changes, because he's played a few different positions kind of over the course of the last several weeks as well, and I'm sure that kind of has to contribute. And
So
Andy
interesting
says,
comment from Andy here,
yeah,
talking about Joaquin Sosa at left back compared to center back. What do you think about that? Because he did have some good games.
yeah. I mean, I think when we talked about him playing that position, we agreed that he wasn't like as bombastic, if you will, as Ruan on the opposite side of the pitch. However, I think he played with a lot more liberty, perhaps, compared to as a central defender. And that's unsurprising. And I think we'd also said, like, maybe if he were given a consistent run of several matches in a row at this position, that he would kind of become a bit more expansive, because we did see him like do some interesting runs where he won a penalty for Montreal.
Yeah.
He managed to combine for some interesting like give and goes with some of his teammates up in that face of the pitch, but he's not like a George Campbell or a Kamal Miller, where as a central defender, he's going to take the ball and carry it forward. So it doesn't surprise me that he was more of a threat once he was liberated from the central defender position.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you. He almost feels a bit like I don't want to say Alistair Johnston, but
Mm-hmm.
definitely the second that they found a bit more joy out wide, you could tell that they really enjoyed that freedom to
Yeah.
get forward. And Alistair Johnston obviously is maybe his offensive, what he brings offensively is a lot more impactful with just his crosses and his quality of that final ball. But I think you could tell that when those hyper athletic center backs give that freedom to roam, they relish it, and I think that that's something Laurent Courtois tried to maybe enable, because George Campbell keeps on doing the same thing and he hasn't seemed to end up in any kind of trouble or getting told off by Laurent Courtois. So it's very clearly something that Laurent Courtois wants to maybe
Yeah.
enable and maybe rein in a little bit and make sure it's used at the right place and at the right time. But it's definitely something that he likes out of his center backs, and I can't blame them, because when it works, and it makes for some really entertaining play.
Yeah. Yeah. Agree. So shall we move on to the midfield?
The midfield, yes.
All right. Let's maybe start with Victor Wanyama, who was wearing the captain's armband. Obviously,
Yes.
that was a point of contention in and of itself, because I think it was during the time that I was away. I'm so sorry. I can't
Yeah,
remember if you guys did an episode or not.
we did not, but it was
Okay.
definitely a big talking point.
Right. So, I mean, I think it is like worth just kind of adding that context back in because it has been a few weeks. So, a few weeks ago, it was uh, when the captain who had been playing captain at that time was being subbed off, tried to hand off the
Was it
captain's arm.
Saliba? I think it was
I
Saliba who'd
believe
come
it
off.
was.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, I don't recall perfectly because I was out of the country, so I just kind of caught snippets of it. Anyway, tried to hand the captain's armband off to Nathan Saliba, and Nathan Saliba refused it. All right, my apologies, not Nathan Saliba, Victor Wanyama.
Wanyama, yeah.
Apologies, I was thinking backwards here. So anyway, they tried to hand the captain's band back to Wanyama, and he refused it, which is obviously not something you see every day in soccer. And of course, I think we've all, like, not just our podcast, but in general, Montreal fans have questioned a lot about what kind of Victor Wanyama's role is this year, especially after the tumult of last year and how he had previously worn the captain's band, no problem for Montreal. So it was interesting, definitely, to see him start the match. Did you make it to the press conference yesterday, Elias?
I did. I did.
I was just wondering if that came up at all, or
It
at
did.
any other ones I might have
It
missed. Go
definitely did come up, and look, it appeared to be a miscommunication because he thought that given the fact that he hadn't played
ahead. Hmm.
a significant amount, he didn't think that he was getting the armband. He thought, comes off, you give it to the armband, and you give it to someone else who maybe had more minutes. So that's what Laurent
So
Courtois had
that's
told
the
us.
party line. Yeah.
Exactly, right. So that's what they tell us, right? And look, honestly, I'm not gonna read into it
Yeah.
anymore until there is something to read into. He
Okay.
wore the captain's armband when it was appropriate, and when he came off, Nathan Saliba wore it, and I think that was maybe just a show of goodwill from the Courtois to say, Nathan Saliba, who had been wearing it in the absence of
Mhm.
Pietro and Waterman, say, what, we're gonna give it to Wanyama tonight, just because, maybe it's an olive branch, maybe it's nothing. Again, you read into it maybe when there's something a bit more explosive, but I think honestly that kind of like the Kokoro doghouse, until there's anything new,
Right.
it seems to be
It's
like
all speculation.
it seems to be like a finished point for now, right? So maybe there'll be more developments, but until there are, I think that it's best we focus on field
Stuff
stuff.
on the pitch.
Exactly.
Right on. No, that's fine. You know what? I'm okay to move on from like rampant speculation. So all good. All good. And I can see there that Andy actually posted that he had a scoop, which is interesting.
Yeah, but the
Um,
practice video, I'm not sure what practice video you're talking about, Andy, but
Interesting.
there's been a lot of videos
Mhm.
coming about practice where,
Things might not have been super glowing.
things are happening, and
Hmm.
even if they're not happening, it feels like they're happening, and I think there's just so much tension around the club that time to focus on the pitch, like we said. So on the
Hmm.
pitch,
Yeah.
how do you think Wanyama did in his first start in a while, actually?
I mean, I think we have to come to terms with the fact that Wanyama is not the player that he was when he first signed for this team. I
Hmm.
think that's just a fact of the matter. So I kind of tried to watch him last night, like not trying to use like say 2022 Victor Wanyama as my point of reference because if I was gonna benchmark his performance against that, then I was gonna be sorely disappointed. I felt like I saw a lot more effort than I had in his other matches this year. Has he slowed down considerably? Absolutely. Is he as strong physically as he was? No, I don't think so. However, I do think that he it felt like he was a lot more engaged than what I'd seen in
Yeah,
previous matches. You can still see that he has vision for passes, and he knows when he can take risks. Like you can still see that intelligence is absolutely still there. And that is absolutely a valuable asset, especially when it was a relatively young team that was playing around him last night. Aside from maybe like Joseph Martinez, um, so I think he brought a lot more positive to the pitch than he had earlier this season.
yeah. I definitely agree with that. I think that he still does have that composure, and maybe that composure was a little bit contagious at times, which is
Mhm.
something I think sorely needed. But yeah, you know, you could tell that the sun is beginning to set, and I think that it's a little bit upsetting because
Yeah.
you still see his willingness to be that Victor Wanyama of even 2 years ago, like you said, and
Hmm.
sometimes it doesn't come off, and I think that almost hurts more than uh the actual act itself of like maybe
Yeah.
you misplaced pass or losing possession. Just the fact that there's still this memory, such a recent memory of Victor Wanyama
Hmm.
that we come to expect, that that hurts almost more.
Yeah.
Look, the trade window, the transfer window is opening soon, and I think
Hmm.
that it might be best for both parties if they find a team with a good fit for him,
Yeah.
and get what they can, because I don't see him renewing his contract, and
No, I
I
don't think
don't
it would be
think,
beneficial to anyone.
and exactly, I don't think it'd be fitting for him to leave on such um such an anticlimactic exit.
Yeah.
So I think that
Yeah.
it might just be best for everybody if thank you for your service, kind of like go the way of Rudy Camacho, where it's not in the plans,
Yeah.
best to go on good terms and on your own terms rather than just let the contract peter out and get nothing for
Yeah.
it.
Kind of wind up an unattached free agent and forever. Yeah, anyway, it'll be interesting for sure to see what comes of Victor Wanyama during this transfer window. I do feel bad, and he does raise an interesting question, like what
Yeah.
could. I'll be honest with you. I struggle to imagine like teams banging on, I guess, Gabriel Gervais' door uh, for for Victor Wanyama. What we've seen this season pales in comparison to the Victor Wanyama we knew. Do I think that he can still bring a lot as far as leadership, as far as experience, and just having kind of seen it all, done it all in the world of soccer? Absolutely. But I'm not sure that there are teams in MLS that are going to be willing to pay for that experience.
Mhm.
Given the constraints and as well the fact that he is currently earning a DP salary. So I'm kind of wondering if an option abroad is perhaps not out of place.
Yeah, I think I tend to agree with you. I think I can't really think of many teams in MLS that have A, the salary room, and B, the willingness to
Mhm.
accommodate, what is it now, just over 1.4, 1.5 million now for Victor
Yeah,
Wanyama.
roughly.
So I tend to agree with you. I think maybe a transfer,
Yeah,
maybe he wants to go back to England, maybe a team that needs some veteran leadership.
yeah.
It's possible, but I think that they have to kind of entertain and any
What?
kind of
Yeah,
suitor that wants it, because
yeah.
again, I don't think the market in MLS is that big.
No,
Um, that's for sure.
no. And I don't think like when it comes to say monetarily speaking, I don't think it's going to be. I don't think they can afford to hold out for a couple of million or anything
Oh,
remotely close
no,
to that.
no, I don't
Yeah.
think so either.
In fact, I would say as long as they get off not paying part, no, or like not subsidizing part of his salary for say the
Hmm.
rest of 2024, I would kind of consider that a win, if you will.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, but anyway, definitely something obviously to keep an eye on. And as we saw, Gabriel Gervais will be speaking to the media later on this week for the first time in a while, certainly.
And a lot, well,
Um,
since Olivier Renald's departure,
yeah,
yes.
exactly. So basically, since he kind of really, I guess, assumed the sporting director role,
Yeah.
um, so it will be interesting to see if perhaps anything regarding that particular player's fate comes out in those discussions. Shall we shift our attention to Nathan Saliba?
Let's.
Okay, I thought Nathan Saliba had a phenomenal game last night. I really, really enjoyed his performance. Obviously, Fernando Alvarez did play the hero, saving the goal off the line, but I loved so much of what Nathan Saliba did in the middle of the pitch. He was able to carry the ball and dribble. He played some really interesting passes out wide, switching the play and kind of, I think, maybe taking more risks than several of his other teammates have been willing to do, which created some situations that I will say could have been interesting for Montreal, if they had maybe capitalized properly or played a more precise cross after the fact. I thought he had a lot of energy. I just thought he had a lot of intelligence. I thought he was like
Hmm.
always where he should be, like in a place that like he wasn't running into somebody and he wasn't leaving, you know, a huge gap in coverage. So for me, honestly, it was a lovely match from Nathan Sliba.
Yeah, absolutely, I agree. It felt like the almost the other side of the coin in Victor Wanyama and everything we talked about, where someone at the twilight of his career that athletically and just wasn't as sharp as we know him to be. Nathan Saliba seems to be the exact opposite in that he's been, I don't want to say a revelation because it's been quite steady his progression, but
Mhm.
he's finally starting to make that midfield his own. And I think that I look back at that run in April, May, where they had nine or 10 games in a month, and he was out with his hip injury, and those were games that he should have been getting. Those were minutes
Yeah.
he should have been playing, and he didn't get the chance because of that injury, and how much that hurt him. But it looks like he's really making up for lost time because again today, when you look at Mathieu Choignard's career progression to get to the point where he is now, where he's a two-time All-Star, perennial starter, club MVP,
National team player.
national team player, right? At this point, when he was 19,
I
20
think I
years
think he
old,
was still coming to grips with the
he was
physicality of the league.
exactly right. He was nowhere near the level Nathan Saliba's playing at.
Mhm.
And so when I look at that, and I look at we talked a bit about Mathieu Choignard's prospects overseas and how in eights or box midfielders are almost a dime a dozen in Europe.
Yeah.
But the thing is that what Nathan Sliver brings this intelligence, maturity, but also this ball winning capability
Mhm.
that a lot of players don't have with his technical skill set at that age. That's what European clubs are going to look at. That's what the
Yeah.
national team is going to be looking at sooner rather than later. Because again, we'll talk about it later, but a ball winning midfielder in that Canadian national team right now is
Mhm.
sorely needed.
Yeah.
So, you know,
Eh,
everything about him in the last couple games has been so 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 important, and it really does invite a very very tricky question that I tried to ask Laurent Courtois, and he kind of sidestepped it, but
Mhm.
Tate also asked us this question on Twitter. When CF Montreal's player returned from the national team, do we see a change in formation? P.S. Good luck Tuesday night. Your American brothers and sisters are pulling for you. I don't think all the Americans are pulling for us, but I appreciate that very much, Tate.
At least Tate is, and that's, let's face it,
At
that's the
least
most important one.
exactly. At least Tate's a good sport, and we love Tate. But it's a very interesting question that I think even the staff themselves are maybe kind of wringing their hands and avoiding
Mhm.
answering because Samer Piet and Mathieu Choignard have been lights out this year, but Nathan
Yeah.
Saliba is I don't think yet, but he's almost made himself indispensable. So if you're
Yeah.
Laurent Courtois and you look at this, do you consider shifting tactics? Do you consider maybe uh giving Mathieu Choignard or Samuel Piet, dare I say, some time off the bench? What do
Mhm.
you make of this?
I mean, it's a good problem to have for sure. Let's face it, Montreal's had their fair share of problems this year, so this is like kind of a good one to have. I mean, we'll certainly talk about it a little bit later on, but we still have the eternal question of who is a proper attacking midfielder for this team. There could also be the option of shifting Matishwanya up a bit higher on the pitch because he can play a number 10 role serviceably, even if, yeah, he is realistically better, in a more box to box role. But I mean, being able, especially with Leagues Cup coming up and the intense congestion that the schedule is about to undergo, being able to rotate these players and kind of not feel like you're downgrading, quote unquote, or that you're, pulling into your depth, terribly. Um, I mean, that's kind of a pro. I find it unlikely that Montreal is going to suddenly change tactics because it's been very rigid so far this season.
Mhm.
So I do find that unlikely, and I think probably just a rotation of personnel is the more likely scenario.
Yeah. I at the beginning of the season we were giving our hot takes. My hot take was Nathan Saliba is going to make himself
Hmm.
not just a starter but a perennial starter, and
Hmm.
um I don't think he's there yet, but he's definitely a hell of a lot closer than I thought he'd be at this point in the season.
Yeah.
So, especially after coming off of a month and change injured.
Hmm.
So I think he's got all the makings of the next in the long line of Montreal midfielders that homegrown, and they love we do love our homegrown players, right? So
Yeah.
I think Nathan Saliba is already a fan favorite, and I think it's only going to go upwards.
Agree. No, and it's going to be really interesting to see how this plays out when the Canadian players do come back to ostensibly reclaim their roles in the midfield. Because certainly it's going to be hard to say Nathan Saliba deserves to return to the bench.
Some good competition. We
Yeah,
love it.
yeah.
We love to
So
see it.
that's what they say. It's healthy to have good competition. So I guess we're gonna really put that to the test. So let's move to our wider players. So we have Lassie Lappalainen and Raheem Edwards. Maybe let's start with Lassie since it's his first start in quite a while.
Yeah,
Unless
loved
he
it.
started some matches while I was gone.
Well, he got more minutes finally because
Yeah.
he's finally gone more than one game without injuring himself, which is
Woohoo. Excellent.
chapeau. But
Mhm.
no, I think going forward, he was probably one of the more he was probably one of the biggest catalysts going forward, which is what I
Mhm.
was really happy to see because again, he's not known for his defensive work. So if you're going to be a
No.
defensive liability, you better make up for it on the offensive end. And
Mhm.
he was definitely getting in the good spots, and he was putting himself in really good positions. But I think at the end of the day, his play is emblematic of the biggest problem with the Montreal attack right now. It's just nobody is decisive. Nobody
Yeah.
is willing to say, okay, this is enough
I'm gonna take my
thumb
ownership.
twirling, make something happen, right? And
Yeah.
Kota talked about it. At some point, you can't focus on being perfect. Somebody has to do
Mhm.
something decisive. And
Yeah.
Lassie got himself in really good spots throughout this entire hour on the field, but it was just now there was never that final nail in the coffin, right? And I think that's what we've come to expect from Lassie. But it's almost emblematic of the entire attack at this point.
Yeah. No, and it made me think of like there was a specific moment very late in the match, and it was like and Lassie had come off by this point. 'Cause the goal had already been scored, I think, and it was almost like they were trying to dribble the ball into the net or like pass the ball
Mhm.
into the net. Like they were just, it was just so I don't know how to say it. It was like they were just trying to make everything happen so perfectly and so minutely. And I was like, this doesn't align kind of with what Courtois had said, in his greeting to the Montreal public, in his
It's
first press
it's it's the
conference.
Columbus in him,
Maybe,
the champagne
maybe,
football. It's gotta happen.
maybe. Yeah. But anyway, no, I think you raised a really good point by saying kind of what we saw from Lassie is emblematic of probably a larger issue with,
Mhm.
with Montreal. That being said, I think particularly if George Campbell is going to be your right center back, I'm not sure if it's a tenable long-term regular solution to have Lassie as your right
Oh, I
wing
don't think
back
so.
because you have a player who loves to drive forward, from the defense, and you have a player who is not going to track back nearly as often. So it's kind of like a match made in hell, if you will. And it's not something I would recommend all the time. And I prefer definitely that we keep it to a minimum. And
Yeah.
yeah, that being said, obviously Lassie did, in the second half, he did put a shot off the post. So he was willing to take ownership of a shooting chance at that point. Of course, unfortunately, didn't come quite off. But yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, I think Lassie's been with Montreal since like 2019. So I think like we know what we get from
It's been
him.
5 years already.
Yeah.
Holy.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. Where does the time go? Um, and so for me, it was kind of like a very typical, I would say, Lassie Lappalainen night. Um,
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah.
And on the flip side, Raheem Edwards.
Yeah, Raheem Edwards. We kind of talked about. I said all I had to say when we talked about his partnership with Sosa.
Hmm.
Technically, they did very well defensively. That left side was there wasn't that much danger. They did a good job in
Hmm.
keeping that, but there's no danger going forward. That left side is almost a non-factor in the
Hmm.
final third, and I think that's really, really, really struggling when you already don't have an attack that, let's face it, they're not world beaters, right? They
Hmm.
when they score and they win by committee. They don't have one or two people that do everything. You
Hmm.
need to have as many options as possible, and if your entire left flank is basically you're basically saying that's ineffective. We'll figure it out another way. Then that can't happen. So
Yeah.
I don't know if Laurent Courtois go back to the drawing board. I think that Raheem Edwards is a really good fit,
Hmm.
but they have to do something. And
Yeah.
if they're willing to live with we have one wing back who's a bit more conservative, we have one wing back like Juan who puts his flash mask on and goes nuts.
Yeah.
Fine, but you then have to bring in a winger. You have to have some kind of threat on that left hand side that, if you have Ariel Lassiter in, or if you have, Jonathan Vissin or whoever you want on that left wing, you need somebody to kind of at least bother
Hmm.
those right backs.
Yeah. No, and I'd be really curious as well, regarding what are the instructions that Raheem Edwards has been given, because it does feel like he was a lot more involved earlier in the season.
Hmm.
And it's kind of dwindled, I would say, since. So I'd be curious, if the instructions that he's being given by the coaching staff have changed since his early matches with the club. But as well, I think maybe it is just again another symptom in the lack of Montreal consistency in attack.
Yeah, I think that's definitely the next big issue that needs to be
Conundrum.
addressed for sure.
Yeah.
Conundrum. Yeah,
Yeah. Totally.
there's always got to be at least one.
Right. All right. And how's that for a nice segue to our three attacking minded players for the night? So we have Dominik Yankov, Joseph Martinez, and we had our final player of the night.
Ari Lassiter.
Lassiter, yes.
Yes.
All right. So shall we start off with Dominik Yankov, whose night did end at the 45-minute mark?
Mm-hmm. I gotta feel bad for him because he
Yeah.
still hasn't been able to
It
really
just
find his
isn't
rhythm.
clicking. Yeah.
Exactly. We see this execution and we see this level of play in
Hmm.
moments, and but the thing is, it's so inconsistent. And
Yeah.
I think Andy said it best, a bit more direct, and I try and be a
Yeah.
bit more diplomatic, but I definitely think that having Joseph Martinez, for example, in those pockets of space is a lot
Hmm.
more effective. And
Hmm.
I don't know, Dominik Yankov just needs to,
Yeah.
I don't know, maybe kind of just reset and recalibrate, because he's definitely not finding his spots or his rhythm.
Yeah. No, it was difficult to watch, honestly, last night. You know, I kind of struggled as to who I thought had a worse night between him and Ariel Lassiter. Of course, Lassiter, there was like a bit more sample size to judge on because he did
Hmm.
remain on the pitch longer than Yankov did. But it just, I don't know. I mean, it could just be a question of adaptation. We've seen it time and time again with players who come from abroad to MLS for their first season. I don't want to say like it's a write off, but like, you kind of start to panic a little bit in their first season and you're like, wait a minute, like, what did we sign this player for? And then the following season, they've fully acclimated and then they're just a complete night and day change and improvement. So I don't know if it's going to be a question of that for him because you can see that he does have some brilliance in him. He can absolutely pick up a pass. He can certainly he has a great vision. But it's just the execution and just kind of I feel like there's almost a lag between him and the other players.
Yeah, no, I do get that. And I think that's the biggest difference between him and Ariel Lassiter. It's like, they both had difficult games, but Ariel
Mhm.
Lassiter, he has this pace, and he has that ability to take people on one that, even if it's not working for him, he has other ways that he could affect change. And I think that's the
Yeah.
bigger difference when with those profiles where, him, like Dominic Yankov or Bryce Duke, if it's not on, they've got nothing going for them. Ari Lassiter, if it's not going on, he could still contribute, right? He could still use his pace. He can still use his, that left foot, and he can still get into those spaces that Dominic Yankov cannot.
Hmm.
So I think that that's probably the biggest difference. It's probably also why he stayed on
Yeah.
longer than Yankov did, because he does bring that. And we'll talk about just Martinez because I think that's
Mhm,
probably the biggest talking point of the three attackers.
mhm.
But I think that's also what Lassiter brings.
Yeah, yeah, and maybe we can kind of pinpoint him a little bit more. Just kind of transition our conversation to him. He does, like, last night. Last night I kept forgetting who was the player. It's like I forgot it as I was trying to wrap up, who was who, and I also forgot it last night. I kept having to refer to the lineup and be like, who the hell is the other guy out there? Number one, because his hair's changed, possibly that,
Yes,
but also I just felt like he just kind of blended in with the scenery. Like he wasn't decisive.
yeah,
You know, it seemed as though we kind of gotten a little bit of a renaissance with him when he was kind of set free from the left wing back position and allowed to move up. And maybe it's a question of just, he's just gotten back from Copa America. I don't think he played on Wednesday, if I'm not mistaken.
I don't. He didn't, but he played the 2 games prior.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I don't know. No, it's probably not a question of fatigue, man. I'm not sure. Anyway,
I don't think
um,
so. I don't think so either.
yeah, we can expect, but the just is, I think, we've come to expect a little bit more from him
Mhm.
since he's changed positions within the team, and it just last night, I don't know if it was just a super off night, but it felt like he wasn't combining with anybody properly. Definitely not really troubling Vancouver's defense or the goalkeeper very much. So for me, it was like a very anonymous night for Ariel Lassiter.
Yeah, no, I tend to agree with you. Someone who's usually, making several runs wasn't crazy, but I think that honestly, at the end of the day, if you had to pick one of the two to sub off at halftime, it had to be Yankov. But that
Mm-hmm.
also explains why Lassiter came off very shortly after.
Yeah, about 15 minutes later. And Andy does ask the question, does he still have a spot in the squad? And I think the answer has to be yes right now, just because nobody else of the attacking minded players has risen above, the rest of the competition, I think. And
Hmm.
if nobody else is stepping up, then almost you can just say de facto. Yeah, he has a role, especially as several other players who would be competing with him for spots along that attacking line are still, working their way back from injury a little bit gradually.
Yeah, I think the clock on him carving
I
out
do
his
think it's,
spot
yeah,
is running out because
yeah,
again, Kokaro's come back, Martinez come back, Mahala's back. Kokoro, who did score a goal, who did score that equalizer. Mahala, who it's definitely getting close. There's definitely, like you saw the game against New York where he missed that golden opportunity. That finishing is still a little bit rusty, but he's
hmm,
definitely making his way back and kind of finding his old form.
hmm.
The clock on him is just, you know, I I don't want to say becoming another Lassie because that's a little bit
No,
diminutive
I don't
to
think
his
that's fair.
profile,
I
but
don't think it's fair to either of them to compare them to each other, actually.
but him almost as a super sub at this point. If you
Hmm.
have everybody in full fitness, I think maybe more of a reality because of the fact that he hasn't been as decisive in the last couple weeks.
Hmm. No, good point. And I would say more than a couple of weeks. Like I said, I missed a few matches while I was away, so perhaps something brilliant happened that I wasn't aware of.
Unfortunately,
But
not.
no, so sorry, one of my rats is just like he's trying to get something off the side of the cage, and okay,
I think he wants to voice his opinion on the Ariel
yeah.
Lassiter situation.
Sorry, I was like, jeez. No, it's okay. He's trying to drag something into the cage. That's fine. I thought he was having a little bit of a crisis there. Um, yeah. So no, for me, for Ariel Lassiter, I don't know. I think we're getting to the point of it's got to change, or he needs to have a visit to the bench as well.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. So it'd be interesting to see. Obviously, once the Canadian players return, that does offer more player options. And, we have players like Opoku who are returning to fitness. So you see Ibrahim. We do prefer Ibrahim off the bench here. The ball is round. But at the same time, if you're effective off the bench, but you're versus someone who's not effective at all, then you probably get promoted to starting, whether or not that's the pro
That's your
solution.
leading scorer, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah. But
So
so that was actually neat. You know what? But I was gonna try to translate to or segue to Sanusi Ibrahim, but I almost forgot to talk about Joseph Martinez. So
yes,
Elias, you said he's a big talking point. I'll let you take it first.
I think that in that first half, you could tell just by his body language he was
Mm-hmm.
miserable.
Mm-hmm.
He likes to play off a striker,
Yeah.
except when you have Dominic Yankoff and Ari Lassiter as the other two options, you are the striker, right? He definitely played. He played as a solitary number 9, and you could tell
Yeah.
he was miserable. He wasn't getting the
Yeah.
ball in the right spots. He wasn't getting the right kind of ball when he was. It was either it was a long ball. It was him with his back to the defense. That's not where you get the best out of Joseph Martinez, and that it's kind of put on display literally like what a minute and a half into the second half when
Mm-hmm.
Sunusi Ibrahim comes off, and then you let Joseph Martinez kind of drop in, and all of a sudden he picks out a beautiful pass to Lassi
Yeah.
Lapalainen, and they almost score. Right.
Yeah.
So it almost felt like he took a breath going, I told you
Oh,
guys.
like I can finally play how I want to play. Yeah.
Exactly. And just his entire body language in that first half was every single ball he got, he was miserable. The hands were in the air.
Mm-hmm.
All of a sudden when he's in
He
a
was just
preferred position, he's
exasperated, I
pressing
think.
harder. Exactly. And
Yeah.
so he was pressing harder when he in the second half.
Yeah.
He was combining everything about Joseph Martinez was better in the second half. I think
Mm-hmm.
about a lot of players was better in the second half, to be honest with you. But you could tell that he was a lot more of a catalyst. And you have Sunusi and Kokoro and you're saying and all these proper 9s. I don't understand why you still insist on putting him up top,
Alone.
but alone on top
Because
of that.
you can put him up top with another striker, and it's a
Exactly.
different story. Yeah,
But you had
but
two
yeah,
wingers slash tens behind him. That
exactly.
he was miserable, right?
Yeah.
So the fact that he got to sag off in the second half and find his pocket space and play his game, that's where you get the best
Mm-hmm.
Joseph Martinez. So,
Yeah.
it was a hot and cold game. Didn't affect the game as much as I'd like to see him do, but I
Mm-hmm.
think with everyone back now, let him do what he does best. Whether it's as a super
Yeah.
sub, whether it's as a starter, but in a 10 position, I think that it's time for him to really sink his teeth into this group.
Yeah. Agree. I think he's such a fiery player. Like
Hmm.
he's such an intense player. It's so obvious. Whatever he's feeling, it's so clear. And like you said, it was pretty clear that it was not working for him in the first half of the match. That being said, he can still be so important, and
Hmm.
especially with the lack of consistency in the attacking phase of play with players, getting injured, coming back, having their moments in the doghouse, so on and so forth. Young players who aren't experienced enough to carry, a starting position, et cetera, et cetera. He kind of is like the most reliable option for this team right now. And so like it
Yeah.
sucks to sometimes have to play in a system that you're not comfortable with, but it is also kind of part of the bread and butter. You have to live with the coach's decision, and make the best of it. That being said, of course, the two players who are meant to support him as attacking on that attacking line had terrible nights of their own last night, which undoubtedly did not help him
No,
feel any
no,
better
definitely
about
not.
what he was doing. Like maybe if they had been more effective, it would have been a little bit less evident from Joseph Martinez that
Hmm.
he wasn't enjoying his night. But either way, it does just make a difference at the end of the day, I suppose. He did, I was curious, I guess, your take on the shot that he took towards the very end of the match,
Hmm.
that went just wide. If you'll recall, it was like one of the last kicks of the game almost. It was close to injury time, I'll say. Um, and
Yes,
I was
yes.
listening to the commentary, and the commentary said like, a player like with that level of experience, like that has to go in the net. Did you agree? Because I thought it was like quite a tight angle that he
It
was
was a
taking a shot
difficult
from.
shot.
Yeah.
I would have liked to see him do a little bit better for sure, but saying
Hmm.
he's got to score that is maybe a little bit of a reach. I
Hmm.
don't know what the XG on that was, but it definitely wasn't spectacular.
It wasn't
But
like a .99.
no, no, I don't think so. I don't think anything like that. But like at the same time, you're right. I want to see him be this decisive um catalyst that
Yeah.
we that Montreal been missing so dearly for so long now. And you look at, we were talking about earlier, right? You look at how this team is almost hemming and hawing once the second they get
Hmm.
anywhere near the penalty area, and they're just like, you no, you shoot, you shoot, you shoot.
Yeah.
This is someone who has got to
He's
shut
gonna,
up. I'm gonna
yeah.
shoot,
Yeah.
right? And for say what you will, but Jonathan Evie saying is that kind of player. I promise you that he's not going to miss up a chance to take a shot. And I think that may also set him apart in the fact that if a lot of players are not scared, if they're hesitant to pull the trigger, you need someone on the field that's going to
Hmm.
go, give me the damn ball and I'm going to take the shot,
Yeah.
because it's getting
Yeah.
ridiculous. Because
Exactly.
it
No.
was getting ridiculous towards the end of that second half.
Yeah. Yeah. It was very frustrating. It felt like they were trying to make art happen on the pitch, and I'm like, this is MLS.
Just
Watching
get the
too
damn
much
ball on it.
Euros. I don't know. Yeah. But anyway, okay. I was just curious what your take on that was, because
Oh
I
no,
was a little
I
bit
agree.
surprised when I had heard the commentary. So thank you for giving your take. All right. Well, let's quickly touch on the performance of the substitutes who entered the
Yes.
match, because some of them certainly did play a healthy portion of the match.
Hmm.
So let's start with Sunusi Ibrahim. We'll kind of just go in chronological order. So I thought Sanusi brought exactly what we always think Sanusi is going to bring: a lot of energy, a lot of running, a lot of willingness to take players on one-on-one, and just kind of a spark that had been sorely lacking in the first half.
Hmm. Yeah, I love Sunusi. I think it's impossible not to love Sunusi. His fitness has gotten so much better in the
Yeah,
last year or
yeah,
so. You remember the beginning of the last season under Hernan Losada, he was out of shape. He wasn't getting minutes. He wasn't even in the doghouse.
in a
You
different
know,
house.
he was in the pound. He wasn't even in the doghouse yet.
Oh,
So I just to see him finally be able to show,
mm-hmm,
get some confidence, because he's still so young, right? He's 21, 22. So putting your faith in youngsters, play the youth, like we always say, right?
mm-hmm.
And he's paying it back, right? He's a leading scorer. He's you know batting way above what was expected of him. And I, for one, love it, because again, that guy is just, him and Mahala are just inextinguishable rays of sunshine. So I love, whenever they're happy, it's impossible not to be happy.
That's a very, very cute metaphor. Lovely. Okay, then let's pivot to the next player who entered, which would be Bryce Duke. He substituted in for Victor Wanyama in the 61st minute. So he was playing kind of a more reserved role, I guess, than
Mhm.
what we're accustomed to seeing. Although certainly over the course of the past several matches, we have seen him play as part of that double pivot. So what did you make of Bryce Duke's entry?
I seriously think that the best thing for him this season was that
Mm-hmm.
shift into the midfield next to
Mm-hmm.
Nathan Saliba, because it's forced him to simplify his game so much, and
I
he's
think
no
that there's a lot more
longer racked.
structure.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. He There is still room for him to improvise and for him to add some
Mm-hmm.
flair, but I think that structure simplifies his game so much, and
Yeah.
he's just allowed to maybe connect with the rhythm so much more,
Yeah.
right? there's
Rather than trying to
there's no
make the
more.
rhythm.
Exactly, and you'd see him when he was playing at 10, he'd get into space and he'd just be racked with indecision,
Yeah.
and he's like, what do I do? There's so many options. What do I do? And
Yeah.
now that structure, and that maybe that simplicity that comes with the build-up play, it makes him find those pockets of space. It makes him keep
Yeah.
the ball moving. He's clearly got a very good rapport with Nathan Saliba, which
Yeah.
is obviously also makes you look even better. But I just think that overall, that making him physically take a couple steps back has caused him to figuratively take a
Mm-hmm.
step back and maybe examine his own style of play.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it could not have gone better for him this international break, for sure.
Yeah. And it'll be interesting to see, because let's face it, there's plenty of competition in that role, as there is up at the attacking end of the pitch. But it would be interesting to see if kind of once, because I'm sure it's going to happen, once he is returned to playing in the more of a number 10 spot that
Mhm.
we've been accustomed to seeing him, it'll be curious to see if like there's kind of a lasting effect from this from this time in a different position on the pitch.
I think that'll be the
But
big indicator on whether or not
yeah,
he's got a future with this team, honestly.
yeah, yeah. Good point. Good point.
Also,
Uh,
this is a very interesting comment from
yeah.
Andy. I never thought I'd hear anybody ever say this combination of words, but Bryce Duke is seriously giving coaches something to think about and making the thought of Shwaniak leaving a bit more bearable.
Oh my god.
It,
There's
it,
a lot said in that
I,
sentence.
I feel like that not necessarily a reach, but it's definitely a big statement.
Hmm.
But I don't agree, but I don't disagree. There's certain
Hmm.
parts of it where I get it, but who would have thought that that's what was being said about Bryce? If you showed this to someone at the beginning of the year,
Yeah. Or even
you
like
know,
5 matches ago.
yeah, like even like a month and a bit ago,
Yeah.
unthinkable, right? But
Yeah.
here we are now, and I think honestly, I don't think he's a replacement for Matsuo Shwaniya, but I do think he's bringing a lot more to the 8 than he ever brought to the 10 on this team.
Yeah. Yeah. Agree wholeheartedly on that one. Okay, our next entrant to the match is the return of Matias Kokoro to Statsbuda. Although he did play a little bit, I believe, a couple of weeks ago, but
Mhm.
his big return.
Proper.
Yeah. So he entered along with Bryce Duke in the 64th minute or 61st minute, sorry, replacing Laster. And of course, therefore giving Joseph Martinez another like striker's striker to play off of up at the top end of the pitch. And no surprise, of course, that the momentum really did swing a lot more in Montreal's favor right along with this substitution.
Yeah,
Uh,
absolutely.
yeah, so obviously, of course, he had missed, I believe, was it 2 matches? I believe it was
One,
2.
he wasn't on the team sheet, and then
Yeah.
one, he was an unused substitute. So I mean,
Yeah.
technically two. Yeah.
Yeah, so he had not played the previous 2 matches, of course, one of which was the coach's decision due to an incident that took place in training. And, he was on the bench for the following match, but just never entered the match, which was the loss at NYCFC. And he did enter as he makes his return from injury as well as from whatever happened. And it was, what did you make of his performance? Obviously, very important contribution on his
Yeah,
part,
I
but
mean, the first goal to Tatsuputo, which is always nice.
love that.
Especially
Yeah.
when you're one of those fan favorite players that celebrate in front of your home crowd is always nice.
Hmm.
But I need to see him make an impact a bit more consistently. Again,
Hmm.
this is also someone coming back from injury. You want him to get his sea legs back. I get it, but he instantly made an impact in terms of maybe physicality and
Hmm.
aggression, which is what
Hmm.
exactly what you expected. But he does have a certain quality about him that we haven't really seen as much um since he came back from injury, and that's what the next thing I want to see him is that ability to play with the ball, because
Hmm.
the grinta and the energy that was never going to go away, but we
Hmm.
need to see some quality now as well.
Hmm. Yeah, and it'll be interesting to see. I think definitely he's going to need more consistent minutes. Not
Hmm.
kind of a stop-start return to play. So hopefully everything stays pretty calm and boats don't get too rocked, so that he can continue to enter matches off the bench until he has like closer to 90 minutes in his legs, and can do some starting. So I do think having him and Joseph Martinez up at the top together will give defenses a lot to think about when they're taking on Montreal as well. They have enough differences in their profiles. I think that they would make a very complementary duo. It's been so long since we've seen them together that it's kind of hard to say for sure conclusively, because I think we did have questions before everybody got injured. But I would be curious to give it another try now, just kind of with everybody, more than halfway through the season by now.
And we still haven't seen those two and Mahala play together at no point,
No,
right?
no,
And so
exactly.
like
Yeah, there's so many permutations that we still haven't
exactly
experimented with.
that we've been
Lord
we've
knows, I think we've
been
exhausted all
deprived
of
of.
them. Go ahead.
We've been deprived of them, and like you said, right?
Yeah,
Just give us anything, please. I need to see those three play together, even if it's
yeah.
just like 10 minutes. Just
Okay,
I beg.
you'll be willing to make your call on that one. Okay,
Absolutely.
fair enough. Fair enough. So let's move on to Ruan, who also had, I think, a very interesting substitute performance.
Yeah.
He replaced Lassi Lappalainen in the 66th minute. And from Ruan, I mean, I kind of felt bad for his opposition the Vancouver end because it was a fresh Ruan with
Yeah.
like all the energy in his legs, and he just seemed to want to expend 19 minutes worth of energy in the 25 minutes or so that he was on the pitch. Because he was just running at that defense like there was no tomorrow. He played, I think we've talked a lot about his crossing ability, his crossing consistency, the infamous third post, whatever you want to call it. And, the cross that he played to Matias Kokoro for the header that got Montreal the point on the night, that was a perfect cross.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's maybe something we haven't really seen from him that much. That his delivery hasn't been. It's definitely not his strongest point,
Mm-hmm.
but God, just seeing him on the field, kind of, just his directness alone makes you go like, where was all this directness in the first 70 minutes that we were waiting
Yeah.
for, right? So I
Yeah.
think that he still has some work to do in his delivery. That final ball still needs a bit
Yeah.
more consistency added to it. But look, I mean, goal and assist in the last 2 games at home, at least. He's definitely getting involved on the offensive end. It just has to be a more consistent output now,
Yeah,
because
exactly.
that's the only way forward here.
But I mean,
Training.
yeah, I don't know how they're working on it in training, but really there is no incredibly strong crosser on the Montreal team right
No,
now.
I agree with you. I think,
They, practically
is
all of
Monsieur
them are
Chouanier the
crossing to
best
the third or
crosser?
fourth post. Or, it's not even clearing the first defender. So, I have to, like, when you have nobody who can cross ball half decently or with consistency anyway, I do feel like it's probably something that needs to be addressed at the coaching level, because it can't just be that 11 or 18 or however number of players enter a match in a given match, find themselves all stricken by the same curse, if you will.
Mhm.
Mhm. Um,
That
yeah,
does it
and
for our
so
substitutes, right?
no, we just have one more, which was Julian Saint.
Oh, yeah, he
So
came
he
at the
came
end.
in for
That's true
about
too.
15 minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I didn't really remark enough of his performance to kind of say the whole heck of a lot on it. But any thoughts on your end? It
Kind of the
was
same.
interesting. Just
Almost
yeah,
I almost forgot he came on the field at that.
yeah, because it was a little bit interesting. I think it's worth remarking that it was George Campbell who left the pitch.
Yeah, they moved to a
So that
4-back.
did exactly. So that did signal a shift, which I don't think we've seen very much of from Laurent Courtois so far this season. And that was shortly before Montreal actually did go on and score their goal. So that I think is worth remarking, that they did switch to a 4-back, which of course afforded them that extra body going forward.
What did you think
Uh,
of it? How did you like the 4-back?
I mean, Montreal had definitely, I think, kicked their intensity up a notch in the second half, and I think that they were, they were getting close, but no cigar.
Mhm.
We talked about just kind of the toothlessness in the attacking third, and that lack of cutting edge that contender teams have. But I think so. I think the fact that Laurent Courtois was willing to sacrifice a defender, and kind of it signaled at least a willingness to play for the win, which is what you want to see, because we have seen no shortage of very timid performances from this Montreal side. I think both from a player and a coaching perspective over the course of, say, maybe the last 2 months. So I think kind of it was like like jouer le tout pour le tout, in the sense of trying to just throw it all at Vancouver. So I'll take it. I would consider it positive.
Interesting.
Any thoughts on your end?
I my concern is that, how do you make all the pieces fit? Because I think that they do have the
Mm-hmm.
personnel for it, but it really does feel like this team is almost organized, and like they assembled this roster with with 5 at the back or 3 at the back
Yeah,
in mind.
yeah, I agree with you.
I do think that in a pinch, it definitely works, because I mean, we saw it for what, about, like you said, 10, 15 minutes right when
Mhm.
Vincent came on, and
And it was in the
I liked it.
context of them needing a win, so it
Exactly.
wasn't like
Right. Right.
starting at scratch.
And I didn't hate it.
Yeah.
Um I don't know how I feel about it being used as the default as the
No,
go-to, because of the
I
fact
think
that this roster is assembled.
Yeah.
not with 4 back in mind.
No, I wholeheartedly agree with you on that. I would never expect to see this as the starting lineup or the starting formation for this Montreal team. I do think though that in context it has its merits 100%.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Cool. So I think we did get a couple of questions from
We
Emil.
did. Yes, we got 2 really good questions from Emil. One is the general doom and gloom surrounding the team at the moment warranted, or are we just 2 victories away from being happy and forgetting our problems again?
Hard question. I think the problem, like, I think what generates so much doom and gloom is just the history of this team. And I don't mean like the history on the pitch. I also mean the history, you know, in the offices
Yeah.
and in the boardrooms. I think that's the issue with the doom and gloom. And definitely a couple of wins and entering, say, a playoff position is going to be able to kind of paper over a lot of those larger issues that are contributing to the negativity surrounding the team right now. That being said, I don't think it's going to resolve everything, especially for people who have been Montreal fans for a long time. I do think people are kind of like too invested or engaged, perhaps, in kind of both the on and off the pitch side of this organization to kind of allow themselves to just be satisfied with things going well on the pitch. Because at the end of the day, you know, no, I don't. I still think a lot of people out there don't feel confident that this Montreal team will stay in Montreal, like for say the duration of their lives. So I feel like until things are just super calm from top to bottom being like on the pitch, that people are still going to have like a lot of nail biting and a lot of fretting around the team.
Golly, that's depressing.
Sorry.
I hope, you know, with the World Cup and with the way Canada's doing that, you know, that is way
I'm not
down the line.
prognosticating anything
Yeah, I
by
know.
any
I
stretch.
know, but you know,
I'm
people
just telling you
keep
like
on
what the
talking
general
about it.
sentiment is. Yeah.
I just think people haven't gotten over the Expos, and they're just projecting
Mm-hmm.
their traumas on
Well,
that, which
that's fair.
honestly, you know what, to each their own. But that does segue very well into Emil's second question, which is about Gabriel
Good job,
Javet,
Emil.
who we had talked about is meeting the media on Wednesday. What is the minimum Gabriel Javet must do, say, or explain at his press conference this week? Or what would a successful presser look like for you?
Do you want to go first, Elias? I
Clarity, you
can.
know.
I was just going to ask you, but go ahead. Yeah, listen.
Yeah, I mean, we gave him his flowers when he gave insight into, you know, the future of the club from an
Mm-hmm.
administrative and from an infrastructure standpoint. We talked about the stadium, he talked about all that stuff. We gave him his flowers because he was concise and you know, his vision came across very clearly.
Mm-hmm.
That's all we need is just clarity and
Mm-hmm.
conciseness. All right.
Just yeah.
Stop bullshitting us. Is there a technical director on the way? What are the
Mm-hmm.
plans? The transfer window is opening. Do you have
Mm-hmm.
any plans? Just be we just want some transparency, right? At the end of the
Yeah.
day. The media and the fans alike, that's priority number one because you know this whole Renal saga, I think people are tired of being jerked around. Now, is this me being a little bit optimistic about what we'll get? Maybe. But at the end of the day, if you want a successful presser, that's what it looks like. People leave with questions actually answered instead of more.
Mm-hmm. Just political, you know, speak around questions.
Exactly.
Yeah. And
Is there
funnily
anything you
enough,
want specifically out of the
um,
presser?
no, I kind of think like you addressed it. I think everybody just needs a sense of like where is this project going because it kind of
Mhm.
feels like things have been a bit off the rails, and there's just like this huge gap. Like, you know how they have like the at a lot of companies they have like the diagram and they have like the CEO and then they have like the other C
Mhm.
people and then they have like the you know the executives and the directors and the blah 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 and then you have like the staff like you know just the generic people and it feels like there's like several gaping holes right now in that like organogram of CF Montreal
That's the
and
word.
so yeah and so I think he needs to kind of address like how they're going to operate
Mhm.
until those spaces have been filled is it the fact that like everybody should adjust and we're gonna play the whole, oh, our injured players came back, that's our Mercato. And oh, our players came back from Copa, that's our Mercato, that we've heard a few times from Montreal historically. Or what is the plan at least short term, because at the end of the day the season is going on, the season is actively taking place, there's a transfer window right now, there are players who could benefit from being moved on from this team, there are players who want to be moved on from this team from what we've heard, and there are questions of depth and starting positions and so on that need to be addressed as well. So yeah, I think at least we need a short-term answer. I don't necessarily think he's going to say like, oh yeah, in 5 years, I'm 100% confident that like this technical director who we're hoping to sign is going to be there. But we just need to know that like things are progressing in a way that makes sense for a sporting organization to operate.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So I think probably you and I said the same thing. I just took a lot longer to get there.
Still always very valuable input. We've got one last question. It's also a perfect segue into our next segment. This is from Mark. Would love to hear Hattie's take on Kone now being Marseillais. Of course, I'm sure Hattie is over the moon. Unfortunately, Hattie is recovering from jet lag. He's probably asleep right now. But
can we pin this for next week though, so that he can talk about it?
We will definitely come back next week, and we'll definitely get his reaction.
Yeah.
But this is two of us. Big move for a local boy.
Big move, and we love it.
What was your reaction to the news?
So the first thing I thought of was Hattie.
First thing I thought of.
Yeah, literally the first. I was like, oh my god, Hattie's gonna die. I know.
He probably already has a jersey on the way. So.
Oh, I wonder. Oh my god, if you imagine he shows up next week in a kit
with a Kone jersey, I wouldn't put it past him.
I don't know what his number is. I don't know if that's his, like,
he was 11 I think, with Watford.
Yeah, I have no idea though what it's going to be at
8 with Canada, maybe, who knows.
Well, and national team, like, your number can kind of be subject to change,
Yeah, that's true.
But anyway, huge move. Roberto De Zerbi, I think, a really interesting coach to play for. Did wonderful things with Brighton in the EPL, and was kind of surprising to see him move on. I think is a super interesting move for Kone. The visibility that this move is going to give him on top of his performances with the national team. I mean, I think it's just a natural step in the progression of his career. I'm gonna be really curious. Definitely, really curious to see what happens.
Yeah, can't wait for that because cannot think of someone who deserves it more. So very excited to see where he ends up and how he deals with France, right?
Yeah,
it's a big step up. It's a big step up from the championship, right? Yes. Robbie's asking if I'll be at the presser. Yes, Robbie, I will be at the presser. So
okay, awesome. So we can talk about it next week.
We will definitely be even if I'm not, there's definitely going to be more than enough to talk about next week because it's definitely questions that need to be answered.
Totally.
But that's a great segue to our national teams, right?
Yes. Oh my God. Look at you, Eli. Okay, Eli's just taken over running the show here. So thank you. Yes. So let's start with the men's national team since we just talked about a men's national team player. And I absolutely did not expect to be returning from my vacation to say the following statement that Canada has reached the semifinals of Copa America and will be playing against Argentina for the second time this tournament on Tuesday evening. Canada is now the last CONCACAF team standing in this competition after Panama was eliminated by Colombia yesterday in the quarterfinal level. This is wild.
Wow. And completely on merit too. In fact,
very much so.
I think Venezuela's lucky it even went to penalties. So I think
that's the goal. Go ahead.
Well, not just the goal, but just the missed opportunities, right? From Canada. I'm stunned, and to think that they were a penalty shootout away from playing Ecuador in the semifinals, which is with all due respect is probably a much better than the reigning world champions. I would tend to agree, right? So I think at the beginning of the tournament, I said best case scenario is the semifinals. Absolute best case. Anything after that. this is the best case scenario, right? You play well, not amazing, but you play well
Yeah.
defensively at least. And look, at the end of the day, Jesse Marsh has already gotten everybody on that page
Yeah.
where they're playing like that game against Venezuela is arguably probably the best game Canada's played since the Octagon. I'm
Yeah,
inclined to
I was
say
gonna say like since one of their like epic wins, in Canada.
exactly.
Um,
And so
yeah,
I am completely floored by with the pace and with just how in sync they all seem to be after
mhm.
what this is game number 6 now.
I mean they have
So
also though they've been together now like as a group for about a month because they started playing their friendlies,
that too.
against the European sides, which were Jesse Marsh's kind of first matches. So
Mhm.
they've been together kind of very much almost in a bubble, I guess. But they're also playing in hostile territory because, the Canadian Federation, they get a very small allotment of tickets. Of course, the matches are being hosted in the US and just the diaspora of, you
Exactly.
know, players who are fans of their opposition. It's just such that they're basically playing in like a 95% opposition stadium. No matter where they've played so far, which is fine, and that's kind of what you get when you play in the U.S. Um, it is unfortunate that tickets are as costly as they are, and that they don't get a larger allotment of tickets to work with because it does ruin like a little bit of the accessibility for the Canadian support when they're doing so much right. Um, so I didn't organize like a super organized segment on this because we did break down one match in great detail, but let's just kind of talk about it. So Canada
Yeah.
played 3 matches of their group stage. They lost 2-0 to Argentina. They won 1-0 against Peru. Notably, Peru did take a red card, and so they did win against 10 men. And then they did and then they had a 0-0 draw against Chile to give them second place finish in Group A, after which they played Venezuela. They were tied 1-1 after regular time, and the match went directly to penalties, which Canada did win. Of course, I do want to ask, I just want to say this first because I love it. It makes me so happy. So the Venezuela match, of course, we had Max Pipo as the starting goalkeeper. And we also had the scorer of the penalty that sent Canada through to the semifinal was none other than the man from Marseille, as we can now call him,
Exactly.
Ishmael Kone. And that was pretty wild, I think, to have 2 Montrealers, 2 former Montreal players as well, participate in this, to have such a huge role in getting Canada to that semifinal match.
And Moise Mobito, who
Yes.
laser pointed to the eye and all with a
Yes.
great penalty.
His
So
first penalty.
yeah, first professional penalty,
Yeah.
which is also
Yeah.
crazy
He
because
was cool as a
center
cucumber.
back penalties don't miss, right?
Yeah.
That's how it works. Center back
True.
penalties are excellent and never miss. That's a fact
True
of life.
story.
So,
Yeah. But just kind of based on, because I have been able, I stayed up very, very, very late in London to watch Canada play their matches until I got back. So I think it was the first 2 matches that I watched.
mhm.
So who do you think has kind of been, say, the biggest winners on this Canadian team so far this tournament?
I mean, anybody other than Schaffelberg is respectfully is
Hmm.
the wrong answer. I think from being an afterthought under John Herdman to being arguably one of the biggest names at this tournament, let
Yeah.
alone on in Canada and the Canadian team, I think is such an incredible revelation. You're going to see his stock rise insanely high after this tournament, and Nashville we fielding a lot of offers.
Yeah.
Another one is Moise Bombito. I think that
Yes.
you have some players who had already been in the national team circuit or had been on the radar that finally stepped
Mhm.
into their own, like Cornelius, like even Richie Larea, who at right wing has been awesome
Mhm.
somehow. I mean, that was kind of out of left field, but Moise Bombito has stepped into this role as still almost, a relative unknown, right?
Mhm.
Because you had Alistair Johnson, you had Kamal Miller, you had Steven Vittoria as those center backs that and Cornelius as well as those center backs that were the go-to, and Moise Mobito was maybe a substitute or maybe coming off the bench or a rotational player, and he's
Yeah,
been arguably the best defender in that
yeah, and he's only in his
in that
second
back
pro
four.
season.
Exactly. And so it's not just his athleticism, it's the way he reads the play. He's always in the right spot. And the thing is, he's got pace to boot. So even if he's in the wrong spot, he makes up for it so well, but he's never in the wrong spot because he's a really intelligent defender.
Yeah.
And I think him and Derek Cornelius get along so well. You could tell that, they're having a good time on top of that, right? Even, off the pitch. And that's important for your center backs, right? They get along wonderfully. And I think those are probably my two biggest winners will be Toy and
Mhm.
Staffelberg because I mean they've just been out of left field and they've been spectacular.
Yeah, obviously Jacob Stoffelberg is definitely, I think, the biggest talking point of this tournament, and super thrilled because he is from the East Coast, from Nova Scotia, and that's basically as close as I've ever come to having a player from my home succeed with the national team. So I'm like trying to claim him, even though
As you
I'm
should.
as
As you
Holy Gale
should.
says, the Maritime Miracle. Yeah, we don't have a lot of players, from that neck of the woods. So super, super exciting to see him succeed. Tate also, of course, has a good shout for Maxime Crépeau. He's been the best player of the tournament so far. Robbie, I think, also made an interesting comment, which I don't disagree with. He says, I think
We
we
were
can
about
all,
to get to it. Yeah. The
yeah,
finishing.
we have to improve the finishing. Yeah, Canada definitely, they haven't scored a ton of goals under Jesse Marsh. In their two friendlies, they were shut out, and of course, in the group stage, they only scored one goal across their three matches, and they did score the one goal against Venezuela as well. Not expecting a sudden explosion of offensive output Tuesday evening when they face Argentina for the second time. But yeah, finishing definitely is lacking clinicism for sure.
On that note, though, we talked
Mhm.
about winners. Who are your, I don't want to say losers, but who are the people that are coming out of this tournament worse off in terms of their standing in the national team?
I'm
Because I've got
struggling to
two in
see.
mind. I want to see who you think.
Yeah, I am struggling to see anybody like coming out of this with their standing worse off, just because knowing the caliber of teams that Canada is facing, it's been quite a long time since Canada has faced teams of this caliber,
Mhm.
really since the World Cup, I would say. So I do kind of take it like with a bit of a grain of salt. But as for who is coming out of this a little bit worse off, I do feel bad saying it, having just thrown tons of flowers his way. Ishmael Kone does come to mind. He
Mm.
was largely anonymous, I think, in Canada's first. I believe he started both of Canada's first two matches of the group stage. Um, and it did feel, I'm not sure if it was just the size of the occasion or what, but it did feel like he was kind of a little bit lost out there in both of those matches, and I did think that Canada looked better after he had been substituted off the pitch. Obviously, there's a lot going on off the pitch because that was the time that his OM signing became official. So perhaps there was a little bit more going on in his head. I'm not trying to make excuses or try to read anyone's mind, but I do think that he's been more effective entering as a substitute, at least so far this competition, whereas he had been a starter up until this competition.
All I'm saying is that there's a reason common practice for announcing signings is after tournaments because you don't want players focusing on other things.
Distracted.
But my two are Kyle Laren and Liam Miller.
Yeah, Kyle
Because
Aaron does come to
Kyle
mind.
Laren has look, Jonathan David has been
Just so, I would say.
has been a significant improvement as a 10, purely as a 10. I
Mm-hmm,
think he's doing better than he was previously. I mean, to be
mm-hmm.
fair, the bar was quite low because he really was looking at a position. I think he's doing better in terms of chance creation. Finishing is obviously there's a lot to be
Mm-hmm.
said here about the lack of finishing, but Kyle Laren has been invisible.
Yeah, yeah.
He's
Honestly,
been
look, I completely forgot
physically
about him.
outplayed. Exactly. He's been physically outplayed. He doesn't have the technical quality to beat the slower defenders. And yeah, he's very strong, but this is Copa America. Everybody's very strong.
Yeah.
And so I think that I don't want to say is ineffective, but I don't know why he's starting. I can't. I
Yeah.
would much rather see them put a proper 10 up there. Jonathan Osorio, for better or for worse, has been very, very solid. I think having Jonathan Osorio in the 10 and having
Yeah.
um Jonathan David step up is a much better fit, and then you could find either, um Ali Ahmed, or you have Samuel Piet, or you have Ismail Kone next to Steve Eustachio in
Yeah.
that midfield. I think it
Yeah.
would probably be a much better fit and would
Mhm.
bring a lot more balance to the team because Kyle Aaron just hasn't done anything. And Liam Miller, you got your position taken by a right back, and it's working. You know,
Mhm.
Richie Larea has been excellent, and I think that honestly, Liam Miller, when he's come on off the bench, has been, especially against Venezuela,
Yeah.
was completely ineffective. And I mean, look, missing the penalty doesn't help your stock either. But even if he had scored his penalty, he
Yeah.
did not have a good cameo.
No.
And I'm starting to get a little bit uh annoyed with Liam Miller because it's becoming increasingly common. I mean, the
Yeah.
last highlight I could think of is that crossbar he hit against,
Yeah.
was it the Netherlands? Or was
I
it
think so.
France?
No, I
And
think it
that's
was France. France.
against
France.
France, right? It
Yeah.
was a beautiful shot, but again, that's
Yeah.
the one thing that I could remember from Liam Miller in the national team jersey. The
Mm.
rest is kind of just
Yeah.
invisible.
I feel like he's had moments where he's like, demonstrated some really interesting footwork, where he's, played an interesting pass. Obviously, he does have an eye for a shot. But I do agree with you that the consistency has not been there from him. And I think the problem is like, and it's a good problem. It's just
Mhm.
a matter of the caliber of players that this team now has is such that kind of there are players who can be much more consistent. And I'm not saying that like Virgil Rea is, going to go sign for Barcelona tomorrow, but
Oh, no.
he also brings a je ne sais quoi, and the kind of that extra, you want to talk about a player with grinta. He's got that in
He was
spades.
born for Copa America. Let's just
He
put it that
was,
way.
honest to goodness, yeah, yeah, yes. I think, yeah, the degree of shithousery that this competition offers is right up his alley for sure.
Which also makes
But
sense as to why he's playing further up the field, because it's just
yeah,
pace and aggression and just piss off
yeah,
the left back as much. I mean, he drew a red card, right? So I mean,
yes, he did.
all by himself.
Yeah, good point. Very good point. But anyway, that being said, obviously Canada is going to face Argentina for the second time
Yes.
on Tuesday evening. Regardless, Canada will either be playing of the outcome of that match. Canada will either be playing the final on Sunday, should they win against Argentina, the top team in FIFA with Lionel Messi playing for them,
You
or
gotta
they will be
believe,
playing
man.
the third place match on the Saturday, the 13th, and their opponent will be one of Colombia or Uruguay. Regardless of what happens in these matches, I think this is a phenomenal opportunity for Canada to once again play some of the top tier opposition available to them in
Hmm.
the world.
This still feels so ridiculous to me just to look at.
Yeah,
You've
it's
got
weird.
Colombia, Uruguay,
It's very much like one
Argentina.
of these things that's not like the others.
Exactly. It feels like one of those. Like, it feels like a meme that been made like 10 years ago, just as like a
Yeah,
joke. It's like, hey, throw in Canada, but no, it's reality, and it's
yeah.
completely on merit, and it's
Yeah. So no, that's the thing. Canada's performances, I think, definitely brought them to where they are. It'll be really interesting to see kind of what lessons they've picked up from their first match against Argentina. It is a little bit disappointing, that you don't get to like the team still get sent to the other side of the bracket. But it is what it is. And certainly, I don't think any players on the Canadian team are going to turn down the chance to play against some of the absolute best players on the planet,
absolutely.
possibly, in several generations on the planet. So, will absolutely be an interesting watch on Tuesday evening. And if anyone knows like which bars in Montreal are showing the game, please let me know because I am looking for. My friend and I are gonna go watch somewhere
I feel like
after
you
work
can't
on
go wrong
Friday.
with the Burgundy Lion. I feel like you
Yeah,
can't
that's
go
always a
wrong.
good one. We're thinking about doing the Euro final there though, because
That's
they're
gonna be
gonna
a
do like an
madhouse.
outdoor
Oh,
viewing. Yeah,
really? Oh, that's awesome. That's gonna be a
yeah.
madhouse.
So yeah, we're thinking about doing the Sunday there. By the way, if Canada does play in the final, we are gonna have to discuss our recording schedule for next
Oh,
Sunday. Yeah,
that'll
but
be
but
oh
we're
crap,
not
that's
putting any. We
true.
do not put carts before
You
the
mean
horse on the
when
ball
they're in
is
the
round.
final?
Okay, honest to God, Elias, if I had control, I would just click go off live now and just like yell at you. Because you know how I feel about that. My
Yeah, I
strong
know,
feelings on the
but
jinx.
I couldn't help it.
Fair enough. So obviously we will certainly, regardless of the outcome on our next episode, we will absolutely discuss Canada's overall final performance at Copa America for sure. And shall we turn to our last piece of Canadian national team news,
Of
which is most
course,
certainly not the least.
it's very
So
interesting.
yes, well, our men are participating in Copa America. The women's national team is participating at a preparatory camp of their own as they ready for the Olympics, which are kicking off in just a few days, really.
Yeah, we're almost there.
I know exactly. Well, a couple of weeks, I guess, 18 days. So as part of this, Canada will be playing 2 friendly matches. One is going to be against Australia, and the other one is going to be a behind closed doors match. I believe the team that they're going to be facing is reported to be Nigeria
Hmm.
um, as part of this. And then, of course, they're going to be kicking off against France in Paris. So earlier last week, I should say, sorry, Bev Priestman did reveal the 18 players plus alternates who were selected to participate at the upcoming Olympics. So just to read it off, we have as our goalkeepers, Sabrina D'Angelo and Kaylin Sheridan. Defenders are Kadisha Buchanan, Sydney Collins, Vanessa Gilles, Ashley Lawrence, Jade Riviere, and Jade Rose. In midfield, we have Simi Owujo, Jessie Fleming, Julia Grosso, and Quinn. Forwards are Janine Becky, Jordan Heidema, Chloe Lacasse, Adriana Leon, Nichelle Prince, and Eveline Vien. And 4 alternates were also named should a player be no longer able to compete from the main squad. We have Gabrielle Carl, Lysiane Prou, Deanne Rose, and Shalina Zadorsky. So I have some thoughts, but Elias, if you want to maybe go first.
I don't know the extent of Olivia Smith's injury that kept her out of the
Mhm,
roster. What was it, in a couple months ago?
mhm.
Um, but I have no idea why we don't see her name on this list.
Yeah.
It has even as an alternate, it has to be due to injury,
Mhm,
because that was probably the only thing that really stuck out at me as
mhm,
to somebody's name isn't here and there's a problem. Why? I think that, she's been not just excellent, she's been incredible in Portugal, and I think that she absolutely deserves this kind of call up.
mhm.
So not having her there is definitely something that makes me raise my eyebrow. I'm giving the benefit of the doubt and assuming it's due to the injury, and just a lack of
Yeah.
fitness, because that really is the only thing that really stick out to me as, wait a minute.
Mm.
Other than that, though, nothing too surprising in that roster. Nothing really stuck out to me as. I mean, there's always
I,
some difficult decisions in the depth of
mhm,
the back line. I think that's probably the
yeah.
only one that really, caused some questions. But other than that, I'm not too surprised.
I think I will say that I am a little bit surprised not to see Gabrielle Carl be part of the main squad, just knowing how versatile she is as a
Hmm.
player. When
Yeah,
you have such a limited number of players that you can call, obviously alternates are an option, and that's how she was named. But I'm really not sure like why Sydney Collins was called over Gabrielle Carl. Personally, I would have flipped those 2 selections and made Sydney Collins an alternate because I think she did several very serviceable performances
hmm,
when she played with the national team. But I thought Gabrielle Carl was a much more interesting player. Not to mention, of course, that should injury crises arise, she can fill in a number of roles.
it's
We
true.
certainly hope, of course, that nobody has to retire due to injury, but we've certainly seen it happen before. So that I think was like the biggest red flag to me. And right before I'd gone on vacation, actually, Hattie and I had been talking about Desiree Scott because she had been called up for Canada's friendly
Hmm.
matches, and he was convinced that she was going to be called up for the Olympics, and I was convinced that she wasn't going to be. Kind of both of us disagreed on which player would be called up in her stead, but it turns out that Quinn has actually returned to fitness, and we had both agreed that if Quinn was fit, then that was going to be the answer. So that is interesting to see for sure. Of course, that does make you wonder, about Desiree Scott's future in this team. And so that'll be certainly something post-Olympics to keep an eye on.
Yeah, I agree with that. I also one thing that I did find very interesting,
Mhm.
and maybe partially interesting, partially concerning, is the fact that 6 defenders were called up and 6 forwards were called up. But, if they go with their usual 3-4-3, you use 5
Mhm.
defenders and you use 3
Mhm.
forwards. So the fact that they got the same amount of depth is
Mhm.
was a little odd. I understand that that back line, at least 4 of the 5 players in that back line are as confirmed as can be,
Mhm.
but injuries and fatigue are definitely a thing, and having one extra defender is definitely cause for concern, unless they do that thing where they play Chloe Lacasse as that wing back, which they've done in the past,
Possibly, yeah.
which I don't love. But that was probably the only other thing that really made me raise an eyebrow, going, you play with 5 defenders and you only call up 6. That was definitely something that you know was a bit
Yeah,
odd.
unless we're gonna suddenly have a dramatic shift in tactics, which would be very surprising going
Catch
into,
everybody off guard playing 4 back.
yeah, the biggest tournament of the year. Uh, I find it unlikely. Yeah, so anyway, obviously we probably aren't going to get a whole lot of information out of those 2 friendlies that Canada will be playing as part of their preparation for the Olympics. So I think probably like the next time that we're going to have a whole lot to sink our teeth into is actually going to be once they've kicked off there in just over 2 weeks. But certainly will be very interesting, of course, to keep our eyes on how they do, hopefully defending their gold medal. Um, Certainly a tall order ahead of them.
Absolutely, yeah. I cannot wait to
Yeah.
see the men's national team playing against Argentina, women's national team playing against France, both opening the tournament. It's just,
You're feeling spoiled?
into the deep end right away.
Yeah,
Welcome to the tournament with the biggest shock possible.
exactly. No, well, I have to say, we've done a lot of doom and gloom around our national teams, I think, over the past year to 2 years. So it's nice to be able to enjoy moments like this when we can,
Absolutely.
because we know that things can go wrong. We know that things can be mismanaged, and you know, tales can end with sadder endings than we would have liked. So at least we get to enjoy these moments now, because we'll probably due for some hardship.
Never a dull
That's
moment with these guys.
pessimistic youth is
Never a
alive and
dull
well.
moment.
Exactly. But Elias, I do believe that brings us to the end of our show, if I'm not
That
mistaken.
does, yes.
Yes. So thank you to everybody, of course, who tuned in tonight. Hopefully, knock on wood, we will be a 3-person squad next week. I think, if Canada is playing in the 3rd place match, I expect that we will be recording next Sunday evening, same time, same place. Of course, if Canada is playing in the Copa America final, that's TBD, but we'll make sure to announce it if we have to amend our recording schedule, because it will be for
Hopefully
a
we
very
do.
good reason.
Yes.
Exactly. So that being said, of course, our content is always going to remain free to everybody who wants to listen to it. However, if you would like to help us support our project, we do have a Patreon. Feel free to join. And otherwise, I'm just going to wish everybody a wonderful week. Best of luck to the men's national team on Tuesday.
Absolutely.
And we will see you next week for another episode of The Ball is Round.